On today's episode of the Locked On Knicks podcast, I'm going to tell you why last night's showing in Cleveland is perhaps a sign this team is just not going to work.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and of course, typically your Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast. This week, I actually hosted Friday night, which gave me the opportunity to vent a little on this game already. We were going to wait until Sunday to record a full episode after the Celtics game, have a little bit more perspective, calm down a little bit. But I felt like, even though it's a little bit of a busy day, I felt like I owed you guys some kind of reaction on that game, because I think it is a pretty significant inflection point on not just this season for the Knicks, but the entire state of the franchise under Leon Rose, under Tom Thibodeau, and it's the lowest I've been in a couple of years when things have just been so incredibly good for this team on the whole. So we are going to talk through all that today, but first, I wanted to remind you, this is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily podcast on the New York Knicks, giving you the most detailed insight on your favorite team 5 days a week. And be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans in subscribing on both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team every single day. We're gonna talk through why I think this is a low point for the Knicks, why I think they should be asking some existential questions about whether or not this team actually works as currently constructed, and whether it's more substantial than just a matter of making tweaks on the margins, and more so that this core conceit just simply is not going to work, at least in the context of winning an NBA championship. And then I have some real questions about Tom Thibodeau and Mikal Bridges, and I think we can probably safely start things off there. The decision to once again, with OG Anunoby back this time, start Precious Achiuwa over Deuce McBride. And I am sometimes reticent to just rip into Tom Thibodeau, because he is, it's a cliche thing to say, but he has forgotten infinitely more about basketball than I will know at any point in my life. And I try to have some intellectual humility, come back to that and say, all right, there must be something I'm missing. And I just cannot get there, because this guy, he's been in our life, five seasons now, 6 seasons now? I don't know. I'm losing track of time. He's been in our life for a while, and this is an unfortunate trend for all the good you get with Tom Thibodeau. And just to be clear, we have gotten an incredible amount of good with Tom Thibodeau. He is such an extraordinary upgrade on what had been 20 years of just garbage coaching for a franchise, and more so a fan base that just deserved dramatically better. And Tom Thibodeau is not that. He is, when it's all said and done, probably will be in the Basketball Hall of Fame, and deservedly so. Revolutionized NBA defense about 20 years ago at this point, and showed you that he is flat out one of the best floor raisers of any coach in the NBA, one of the best culture instillers is probably a better way to say that, but one of the best coaches at building a culture of excellence, and a culture of winning, and a culture of competitiveness. And it is incredibly easy on nights like last night to take all those things for granted and say, he sucks, he blows, get that man away from my basketball team. And yet that is maybe in a less harshly stated way, that is where I ultimately fall, because the same flaw that held him back 5 years ago with this team is still holding him back. And that he has his creature comforts. And there are some things that make him anxious, and he does not want to poke at the things that make him anxious, even if the numbers scream in his face that is a better solution. And Deuce McBride is the epitome of that right now. In the past, it was starting Elfrid Payton for the first 4 or 5 games against the Atlanta Hawks. in 2021. It was starting Alec Burks at point guard, who is not a point guard down the stretch of a season, over Emmanuel Quickley, who has turned out to be a point guard that at least one team in the NBA thinks is worth paying $150 million to. It is because his trust for experience, and even more so than experience, size, blinds him. And he does not feel comfortable going small unless he is put into a corner and he literally has no other option. And yet we talk about Deuce McBride, a guy who is a fixture in the Knicks' top 5 lineups this year. And you have this golden opportunity to try out a version of your lineup that gives you some real explosiveness with Brunson, Deuce, Mikal, OG, and Karl Anthony Towns, a legitimate 5-out offense going against a team that is one of the most explosive offenses in the history of basketball in the Cleveland Cavaliers. You know you're not going to shut them down. You know that they are going to have, well, you don't know this, but you can guess that they're going to have outlier shooting. There was a chart that I retweeted a couple days ago. It was shot making relative to shot quality, and Cleveland is in their own stratosphere. They are a historically good shooting team. I believe XJ had the stat that like the average Cav shot is more efficient than the average Kevin Durant shot. I hope I'm not misstating that because I don't have it up right in front of me, but that was the gist of what XJ said. And they are an absurdly good offensive team. So to me, it makes a lot of sense for you to be competitive. You are going to have to be similarly explosive. And Deuce McBride, we saw the effect he had when he started against the Chicago Bulls. He helps you get up threes in bunches. They shot 29 threes in the first half of that game. That was one off the team record. And you were going to need that to match a Cleveland team. And then the reason that Tom Thibodeau nominally starts Precious Achiuwa, obviously for defense, not for offense, right? And yet, I don't buy into the idea that the Knicks are a better defense with Precious Achiuwa on the floor because he's not a great rim protector. He's not a great rebounder. And you could have Deuce McBride, who is rated by B-Ball Index, at least as of about a month ago, one of the top 3 screen navigators in the NBA. I think has arguably been, pound for pound, the Knicks' best man-to-man defender this year. And you can have him guard Donovan Mitchell and navigate around screens. And to be clear, the reason Tom Thibodeau is scared of that is because Deuce is not that big. And if you go against a superstar guard, no matter how good the defender is, if they're a smaller guy, they're going to have some trouble. When Deuce was in, like, Mitchell cooked him. So I am not saying that thought process is perfect. All I'm saying is we have an abundance of evidence that the better lineup for the New York Knicks was starting Deuce McBride, and Tom Thibodeau, because of his stubbornness, because of his assumptions about basketball, doesn't get to it. And to me, there was no logic there. And for a guy who in so many other facets, again, is just an extraordinary basketball mind, I just have to assume this comes down to his comfort level and what he's comfortable doing. And at 67 years old, he's simply not, maybe a lack of neuroplasticity. I know I'm throwing a lot out there. Like, he does not want to shift off of that. And that's okay. But I don't think that is a coach that can win you a championship, not embracing the tenets of modern NBA offensive basketball. At least in that sense, this is a Knicks team that is 27th, last I looked, in the NBA in three-point rate, with a roster full of good three-point shooters. And I think a lot of that comes down to Deuce McBride not being on the floor, because when he's on the floor, the Knicks get up enough threes. When he's not, they get up a dire amount of threes. And they just weren't going to compete with Cleveland. I zoomed in before I zoomed out. Bigger picture, this is yet another embarrassment for the New York Knicks against a top 6 team in the NBA, right? I'm gonna throw up the graphic from Knicks Muse. Their largest deficits of the season, down 35 twice against the Celtics, down 30 against the Thunder. At the time, it was 27. The Knicks obviously ultimately lost this game by 37 points to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it was over by the start of the fourth quarter. And that was despite the fact that Jalen Brunson was absolutely cooking to start this game. 16 points in the first quarter, single-handedly trying to keep the Knicks in it. Karl Anthony Towns, I thought, had an exceptional offensive basketball game. In the first 23 minutes of this one, he had 22 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and New York, I think, found something with him where he struggled against these top teams, but he was having a lot of success, especially when the Knicks had Deuce McBride on the floor and opposing defenses could not double Karl Anthony Towns on drives, and he was able to just run a pick and roll with Jalen Brunson, get a switch onto DeAndre Hunter, and then Cat, as he's done the last few games, was a special post-up player, scoring over and over and over again in the post. Even when Evan Mobley was on him, they didn't really have an answer. And that is what is terrifying about this, is your two best players, at least on the end of the floor, they're expected to play well, played really well, and you still got wrecked, which makes me think this roster maybe is not super built to win a championship like we all thought they were. We are going to get into that in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. But first, we need to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I personally love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, what's up, guys? We are back here on Locked On Knicks. So we talked through Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. And look, they are certainly not faultless, right? Like part of all of this is that like the Knicks are trying to cover up two clear-cut defensive weak points. And as many people have pointed out, Tom Thibodeau has historically relied on having a rim protector defensively. And I think that is also part of the reason he wants Precious Achiuwa out there to approximate that, because the whole design of his defense for years and years and years was to force other teams to go to the middle of the floor and funnel them towards a great rim protector. The good news for the New York Knicks, of course, you did not have Josh Hart in this game, who for a team that looked utterly listless in this one, like they didn't care at points, the transition defense and just finding the ball and finding your matchup in transition, an issue for the Knicks this entire season, was as bad as ever. You can put that on Tom Thibodeau. You can put that on the players. I don't know if there is a clear-cut way to discern like who deserves more of the blame. I would argue both sides deserve at least some of it. Frustrating game. You can say that Josh Hart will help all those things, and he will, because he does not have off nights in terms of effort, and I think he raises the effort of everyone else on the court. You can say Mitchell Robinson, who was the best player in a series against the Cleveland Cavaliers, arguably 2 years ago. He will certainly help in this matchup specifically, and will help in general. And maybe that's where the Knicks fall. They start Mitchell Robinson. They say, hey, it was a fun experiment with Cat at the 5. We did our best. It didn't work. We're going to go down the path that got the Minnesota Timberwolves to a Western Conference Finals. And maybe that is enough, because I think that version of the Knicks is a much simpler version of the Knicks, where it is Jalen Brunson centric, and you don't have to think too much about the offense, because it's saying, hey, Jalen, go get us buckets, go create, occasionally get Cat involved, occasionally hit Mikal for a corner three, occasionally hit OG for a wing three, Josh Hart, crash, get offensive rebounds, Mitchell Robinson, crash, get offensive rebounds. And the offense is essentially what it's been the last few years. But when the Knicks went out and got Karl-Anthony Towns, they were aiming at a higher ceiling. They were saying, hey, we saw what Indiana did to us with their 5-out spacing. We saw what Boston did to us in the regular season with their 5-out spacing. We are hoping to get to a scenario where we can be as explosive as those teams, and we can get hot for a series or two and just win with our offense. That was the premise of this team. And unfortunately, it has simply not been good enough to overcome a defense that is generally mediocre and has been just disastrous against the Cavs, against the Thunder, against the Celtics. I'm going to say in 4 out of the 6 games, the first Thunder game and the first Cavs game, I thought the defense held up and the defense was pretty good. To be totally fair to this Knicks team, right? Like we don't, I don't have to exaggerate, because reality is bad enough right now for this group. So I said it, Jalen Brunson, Karl-Anthony Towns, they don't escape blame. The Cavs had 7 dunks in the first quarter of this game. That was the most they've had in a quarter in 20 plus years. So that is about as much of an indictment as you need on the Knicks defense. They didn't stand a chance against Evan Mobley. And the offense very frequently broke down into created advantage, and a guy who I'm about to rip into, Mikal Bridges, had one really nice drive where he got baseline, drew two, swung it to OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby swings it to Precious Achiuwa on the left wing. And again, if that's Deuce McBride, that's a three. It's a three that's very likely going in. Instead, it's Precious Achiuwa. The offense dies because he doesn't want to take that shot. He dribbles in, goes at Jared Allen, bricks it. Had another play where Precious Achiuwa went right at Jared Allen. And while you had about $100 million in salary or over $100 million in salary in Karl-Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges sitting there holding their shorts, watching this guy who is a solid NBA player, but on a really good team is probably like your 10th man. They were watching Precious Achiuwa attack an all defense caliber center in Jared Allen that went about as well as you think. He settled for a fadeaway air ball. Precious overall in let's see the final number. 28 minutes in this game? I think he was starting. I forgot to look there. 28 minutes. He was team worst minus 25 in those 28 minutes. Ironically, the Knicks did play that lineup that we talked about: Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl-Anthony Towns for 1.5 minutes. It was their one lineup that had a positive net rating the whole night. And no, Tom Thibodeau, even with everything going wrong, never thought to go to that. In fact, his push the panic button was to go to Ariel Hukporti and Precious Achiuwa. He said, hey, we didn't have enough spacing issues with just Precious out there. Let's put out two guys who can't shoot. On the season, when those two guys are on the floor together, they played 48 minutes. This is from Pastor Claudio at Doinkstar on Twitter. He tweeted out I believe the numbers are from Cleaning the Glass. Precious Achiuwa and Ariel Hukporti this year, a minus 42 net rating in 48 minutes. That is almost impossible. With just Hukporti on and Precious off, they're +9. With both of them off, they are +12. That was actually on playbyplaystats.com. I'm sure he selected that for probably just the last 10 games, which is why the minutes are so low. But again, it just, to me, screams like everything that is wrong with how Tom Thibodeau thinks about lineup construction and his understanding of modern NBA spacing. And I don't think it gives him the defensive advantages that he wants to go get. But before we finish up, and again, I'm keeping this one very short because I got to run, and I was not expecting to do an episode today. I want to talk about Mikal Bridges. I put out this tweet last night. It relative to the meager following we have on Twitter. It blew up a little bit. A lot of comments, a lot of people telling me I'm an idiot. A lot of people I'm agreeing. But I wrote, for people listening on the podcast side, it is up on YouTube. Beyond Tibbs, I am increasingly accepting that Mikal is just the wrong guy to go all in on to be the number 3 on this team, just not existing offensively against the best teams in the league, unable/unwilling to create offensively, not special enough on defense to compensate. So when people challenged me on this, I said, you know what, let's go look at the numbers. So here is Mikal Bridges this year in 6 games against the Thunder, the Celtics, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Averages 14 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds. He is 45%, or no, that is actually a little high. Let me scroll down so I have the number in front of me. 44% from the field, 25% from 3, 0% from the foul line. And that is because Mikal Bridges, who you invested whatever 5-6 first-round picks in, has shot just 1 free throw in those 6 games. And to me, that is sort of the crux of the issue with Mikal Bridges. But just to finish reading off the tweet, the flip side of that is not special enough on defense to compensate. So let's start off with the offense for Mikal. And he's had 2 good games. He was perfectly fine. I'm putting up the graphic again. That first game against the Cavs, he had 19 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. That's good enough. He was really good that first Thunder game, I thought, on both ends of the floor. And that was the game where I came on after and said, hey, they lost, but this night screams to me that this team is ready to compete for a championship. It's against an Oklahoma City side that we know now is putting up the best point differential in the history of basketball. The Knicks had their number for 3 quarters in that game on the road. They looked exceptional, and they have not approached that level of play since, which is a little bit of a mystery. But if you want to be a glass half full, if you don't want to be as dystopian as doomsday as I'm being, go back and watch that game, because that was the Knicks against the top flight team playing competitive, strategic basketball that lined up with the excellence of the Oklahoma City Thunder and exceeded them for a good stretch of that basketball game. But Mikal Bridges, with the exception of that one, offensively in these games, he disappears. And the worst part about it is he disappears more so when Jalen Brunson is not in the game. When this is a guy, like even if you were low on Mikal Bridges coming in, even the Nets fans who are trashing him on the way out the door and are currently taking a victory lap on that very tweet. Congratulations to you guys. Happy you have something to cheer for outside of playing your way out of the Cooper flag lottery. Maybe that comes back to bite me if they win. If so, congrats to Nets fans. The Nets were taking a victory lap on him. And yet, I thought at baseline, he would be a guy that could carry your non-Brunson minutes, because we saw for 100+ game stretch, even though they weren't very good for most of it, he carried the Brooklyn Nets, and he was enough of a self-starter, a self-creator, that he could somewhat credibly carry an NBA offense. And on this Knicks team, he didn't have to be a number one. He didn't have to be a number two. They got him to be the number 3 option, and not even the number 3 option every night, because there's going to be nights OG really has it going. There are going to be nights Josh really has it going. There are going to be nights that Deuce got red hot and he had it going. But just most of the time, the number 3 option on this offense. And against the bulk of the teams in the NBA, after a really poor start, he's been that, right? 18 points a game, good efficiency. You cannot question the numbers, but it's why it is so important to ultimately sit down and watch these basketball games. It's because you will see just a guy who is not interested in being the number 1 guy, who doesn't feel confident enough to be the number 1 guy when those two are off the floor. And maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe we're still in small sample size territory, and he comes out in the playoffs and he really shines. He has an off season. He says, you know what? That was a down year. My bad. I'm recommitting. I'm working on my game. And he comes back next year and he's more aggressive. He is just not someone who's going to force the issue and get to the rim. He's just not someone. He's never really been someone who gets to the free throw line. And he is reliant on taking really high degree of difficulty, self-created mid-range jumpers. And if you're not Kevin Durant, that is generally, or Jalen Brunson for that matter, that is a very tough zone to live in. And those guys supplement with self-created threes. Those guys supplement with rim attempts. Mikal Bridges doesn't get to the free throw line, doesn't get to the rim all that much, except for when he's in transition. And the three-point rate is great when he has a point guard like Jalen Brunson to set him up, but it's not great when he's asked to self-create. And that is maybe a lack of research on my part. That is not what I expected. And if that's who he's going to be, he needed to be an elite defender, a guy who finished second in Defensive Player of the Year, to compensate for that. And he has simply, in these games and in general, not been that for the Knicks. There have been games, there have been flashes. The Hawks game they played, not the last time they played the Hawks before the All-Star break, but the one before that, about 3-4 weeks ago, he was fantastic on Trae Young. He was special guarding Trae Young. The first half of that Thunder game, he was special guarding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And that's what makes it somewhat mystifying. And to be fair to Mikal, that is not all on him, because with how good modern point guards are, and just the average modern point guard is a guy I think 20 years ago likely would have been an all-star. Like Darius Garland is maybe like the 8th best point guard in the NBA. And he didn't even have a good night tonight. But the point is, like, he can torch you on any given night. It is so challenging to guard those guys, so challenging to navigate screens over and over and over again from someone like Evan Mobley, someone like Jared Allen, who are really good at it, really dynamic rollers, and it is made infinitely harder when you have zero rim protection behind you. Karl Anthony Towns, again, he's not off the hook. He's having the worst rim protection season of his career by far. So that has all made Mikal's life harder. He might look far better on the defensive end of the floor when Mitchell Robinson is out there. All I can say is right now, based on what we've seen, the Knicks grossly overpaid, and they blew their asset load on a guy who's just not good enough to justify. I had people coming back to me in the comments saying, hey, well, Mikal, he was the 3rd best player on a finals team already, so shut up. He averaged 11 points and 4 rebounds on that Suns team that didn't have to play Kawhi and the Clippers. Kawhi was out for that series against the Clippers. They didn't play the team that would have won the West that year, the Denver Nuggets, or the version of them, because Jamal Murray tore his ACL, and Aaron Gordon, if I'm remembering correctly, missed the majority of the series. So miss me with the idea that Mikal Bridges has proven he can be the 3rd guy on a title team. I just have not seen enough this year for that. Ideally, in a perfect world, they would have saved those picks and maybe gone after Giannis this summer. This is why I was advocating for Paul George, something I have to admit now would have been far more of a disaster than Mikal Bridges. And yet the idea behind it, my premise behind it was, I know Paul George, at least a younger version of him, can create his own shot and get to the basket and get to the free throw line, and is a confident, skilled, incredibly skilled scorer. And Mikal is an elite mid-range shooter. He's special in transition. Again, with the right backing, I think he's a great defender. In the current Knicks context, he is merely a good defender. And all of it does not add up right now for the New York Knicks. OG Anunoby, he shouldn't be off the hook either, right? Highest paid player on this basketball team outside of Karl Anthony Towns, or at least the highest contract the Knicks ever decided to give up. 27 minutes, 5 points, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 1 steal, 2 turnovers, 2 for 6. He was coming off of injury, playing a great team. You give him a little bit of grace in that sense, but after an incredible start to this year, he simply has not been good enough either. Like we have to say that. Like the wings were supposed to be the glue that held this team together, and when this team has broken at the seams, sometimes it's been Cat, sometimes it's been Jalen. More often than not, I would pin it on the wings that were supposed to be the heart of your defense. You know what? Josh Hart, who's been incredible, all-star level good on the offensive end this year, he hasn't been good enough defensively either, for the most part. Your bench was not good enough. Deuce got cooked. Campaign got cooked. Landry Shamet got cooked. Everyone got cooked on the bench. And the Cavs, credit to that front office and Kobe Altman, because they built out a far better bench than the Knicks have. Ty Jerome, he's the truth. 19 points in 19 minutes. New York native would have been a really nice find for the New York Knicks. DeAndre Hunter, just gifted to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Always seems to torch the Knicks. 6 of 7 from the field, 4 from 3, 16 points. And if you want to take away a silver lining, it is that an outlier shooting team had an outlier shooting night. 61% from the field, 51% from 3, 19 of 37 in total from distance. Brilliant passing, 38 assists. Kenny Atkinson is a great coach. And you know what? They've certainly been helped by getting Johnny Bryant in there. And the Knicks have undeniably been hurt by losing Johnny Bryant, because this offense, I am not a smart enough basketball analyst to tell you specifically the ways that losing Johnny Bryant is hurt, but I can feel the fluidity is just not quite there the way it was early this season. And it's really not there against these best defenses. I'm hoping, I think we're going to talk to DJ Zullo next week of Knicks Film School, who is someone who's smart enough to tell me exactly why, what's different, what they lost in Johnny Bryant. I bring him up specifically to say, I think the Knicks need a coach like a Johnny Bryant, a younger coach, one who embraces modern offensive principles. And they've had their floor raiser in Tom Thibodeau. He's done a lot for this franchise. Maybe I'll switch off and I'll switch back. I flip-flopped on him a million times. Guilty as charged on that one. And maybe the Knicks make a run. Maybe it comes together. Maybe it looks a lot better with Mitch. Maybe it looks a lot better with Josh. I don't see it right now with this team. And I think given the assets they gave up to go and get Mikal Bridges, they are somewhat limited going forward. They are not totally screwed because they have a lot of young pieces. They still have a lot of contracts they can trade. They can pivot off of Mikal. They can pivot off of Cat. They can pretty much, like, no one's nailed down outside of Jalen Brunson. And maybe they still find a way to go out and make a big trade if they really need to. Picks are going to open up for them in the next few years. But this is your window. Your superstar is 28 years old. Your next best player in Cat is, 29, 30 now? Like this is the window. It's the start of the window, but it's a key year in the window. It is not a year to waste. And right now, it does not look like the Knicks are going to get it done this year. And this is the most I've doubted their ability to get it done with this core in future years, because it seems like a roster construction that works incredibly well against 27 teams in the NBA, but does not work all that well against the 3 teams they ultimately have to beat. So that is a somber note to end on. We are going to have a whole lot more Sunday night after the Boston Celtics game. I got to run. I got to go broadcast a couple of high school basketball state finals. But until next time, be good, and we'll talk to you very, very soon on Locked On Knicks.